let's talk about this. This is incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
And but it gives you really, I think, an insight as to where we are going. For a long time, activists, others were arguing, myself included for that matter, that this notion about abortion is not about trying to save supposed babies. They're fetuses, incidentally, not babies. Not about trying to save babies. It is trying to police, particularly women, all people who can give birth, to police sexuality.
Yep.
And so none of this stuff is to inhibit abortions per se. It does that, obviously, but it really is in furtherance of a broader enforcement of a specific sexuality that is defined ultimately by religious fundamentalism. And you hear the sort of the echoes of that in this case. This is a woman in Warren, Ohio, who had a miscarriage at 22 weeks while using the restroom. No idea what was happening. And the miscarriage fell into the toilet.
Yes.
And she attempted to flush the toilet, and the toilet backed up. And here is the report from WKBN News. This woman is on trial now with for felony abuse of a corpse. Here is some images from that trial in this news report.
Brittany Watts overcome with emotion after learning her case is moving forward. Watts is charged with felony abuse of a corpse, accused of trying to plunge a toilet after having a miscarriage delivery at 22 weeks while using the restroom.
She said she felt the baby come out and there was a big splash.
Investigators say they found a baby.
Just be clear, this is not a baby. This is a fetus. I don't know what definition you would need to constitute when a definitionally dead fetus, non-viable fetus, is not a baby. But continue.
Weeks while using the restroom.
She said she felt the baby come out and there was a big splash.
Investigators say they found a baby stuck in a toilet at Watts' home on September 22nd. Forensic pathologist Dr. George Sturbins testified an autopsy found no injury to the fetus and that the unborn baby had died before passing through the birth canal. He says Watts' medical records showed she visited the hospital twice before the delivery.
This fetus was going to be non-viable. Okay. And it was going to be non-viable because she had premature ruptured membranes. Her water had broken early, and the fetus was too young to be delivered.
Both the assistant prosecutor and Watts' attorney argued why this case should or should not move forward.
The issue isn't how the child died, when the child died. It's the fact that the baby was put into a toilet large enough to clog up the toilet, left in that toilet, and she went on her day.
This 33-year-old girl with no criminal record is demonized for something that goes on every day.
Judge Terry Ivanchek found probable cause to bind the case over.
There are better scholars than I am to determine the exact legal status of this fetus, corpse, body, birthing tissue, whatever it is. Matter of fact, I'm assuming that's what most of these issue one's all about, at what point something becomes viable.
In Warren, Nadine Grimley, WKBN 27 First News.
Now, issue one, people remember, was the attempt or successful attempt by people in Ohio to vote for a referendum to provide a constitutional right to an abortion. But the idea that a woman could be brought to trial to face, or I should say a grand jury, to face charges that they have defaced a corpse of tissue that was never viable, ever. Never achieved viability, ever. This is some county prosecutor starting to build the idea that as soon as conception occurs, that is a human being, that is a person. Because remember, like, non-persons are not subject to laws. And we have examples of that on some level, like, right? Like, I mean, people who are in Guantanamo Bay, they're considered basically non-entities within the United States. And certainly we have historically treated indigenous people in this country and slaves at various times as being basically non-entities. So they're no. This is not a person. This is tissue that was never even viable.
Yeah. So I've known people who have had miscarriages, and it often occurs in the bathroom because you're not feeling well and something leaves your body. That's also often how at-home abortions via the abortion pill occur, where you're over the toilet, you're experiencing that kind of, I mean, it depends on the person, but sometimes it's physical pain. And in the instance of a miscarriage, I mean, for many women, that's exactly what happens here. But beyond the physical pain, I'm just in awe of the complete callousness towards the emotional trauma of, first of all, having a miscarriage, then having the details of that miscarriage being litigated in a potential criminal proceeding because she didn't inspect the bloody fetal tissue that had just left her body in a way that was likely traumatic and scary, because miscarriages are very, you don't exactly know what's happening. Because she didn't inspect it before flushing it down the toilet, which is, it's a bloody mass, and it makes sense to flush it down the toilet. And, even the cop there who was testifying kept calling it a baby over and over again, despite the fact that the testimony clearly says from the forensic pathologist that the fetus was non-viable and was dead upon evacuation. And Black women in this country have higher mortality rates when it comes to childbirth, but also they have increased risk of miscarriages compared when you look at white women in comparison as well. And so when we get into the different layers of how these kinds of anti-woman, anti-choice laws are going to be deployed, it's going to be in a racist manner by definition, just because of those figures and because of the systemic racism in our country and the health and that also exists in the healthcare system as well. And like, it strikes me too that we've talked about this before. Conservatives and right-wing religious folks often see when a woman miscarries, or a person who can get pregnant miscarries, that they must have done something wrong, that they're not like the perfect earthen vessel for the fetus. And, well, I mean, a Black woman probably did a little bit more wrong than a white woman, right? And so this is like, in part, the state using their disciplinary power to enforce God's natural law. I would also argue, and this is just my own speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised
if this wasn't one of those situations too, where there's, you know, some type of Ohio organization or a national organization that is looking for these type of cases, again, particularly in the Ohio, in the wake of the amendment that basically enshrines abortion and contraception and miscarriage care into the Ohio Constitution. If this isn't some type of like last-ditch effort to derail that, because to give the opportunity, at least, for the Ohio judiciary to claim that this is a person. I mean, if they can get to personhood, and this is why they call it personhood, right? This is why they have to pass laws, because a non-born human life is not a person. That's just the bottom line. You don't hear the Constitution talk about human beings. You hear them talk about citizens. You hear them talk about persons and people. And they don't refer, Constitution doesn't refer to life. And this is because you're not a person with rights until you are born. Now, we have criminal statutes about the status of people as pregnant as increasing penalties. In the same way we have hate laws on some level, we talk about contextual relationships with the rest of society. But that is a function. That is a function of the status of the person who's alive. I don't know how you have a corpse when you never had a live person.
Also, what was that woman supposed to do? Call the cops, I guess, after she had a miscarriage. Because just to say, hey...
I'm curious as to how the authorities were alerted to this. Yeah.
Well, but just to say, hey, cops, I just went through a really traumatic moment where I lost a baby that was growing inside of me.
I'd like a cop here, please.
I would please, you know, I don't know what her personal feelings are. I would never want to speculate, but there are, of course, complicated feelings, to put it mildly, that many Black people have about calling the police. And I will say that any human being in this country would have a complicated feeling, outside of the racist implications of it, about calling the police when they have a traumatic and personal health episode and saying like, hey, can you come and intervene here, cops? Let alone the fact that there is a chilling atmosphere right now when it comes to abortion. And many women would probably feel, because they see prosecutions around the country of women, that they could be framed and put into a situation where they would be in trouble with the law. And it didn't matter in this instance. But like, this is what happens when we've decided that this is no longer a right. A right is decreed and by the federal government, not on a state-by-state basis. So we do not have a right to an abortion in this country. This is what happens when you leave when you leave it up to the states and remove that as a right, because we get the criminal justice system involved, and it's enforcing criminality onto women that don't meet the standard of being perfect growers of, you know, the man's seed or whatever. So it's about punishing women, and it's about making sure that they're under the thumb of the patriarchy as enforced by the state as well. That's a depressing story.
Yep. Really depressing and also really disturbing.
We're sure it's not a hoax, though? Maybe
right.
It's been a political hoax or something like that.
Well, right. That was what Tim Pool said about the 10-year-old who had to leave the state of Ohio to get an abortion. Not that the story was a hoax, but the fact that it was politicized was a hoax, which makes zero sense. But more and more of these stories are going to keep coming out.